What's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today we are ranking the albums of Enslaved. And hey, if you'd like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. That's right, Enslaved tier list time, take two, and I did not make this tier list, but the person who did included Hordenesland, which is not actually a full-length album. It's really just an EP. It's solid entry-level stuff, but I want to really get into the full lengths here. So I'm going to go ahead and right off the bat, just put that at C+, and you will notice that I modified the tier list a little bit here, because when it comes to Enslaved, there is nothing below a C+, if you ask me. But let's start talking about Vikingligr Veldi, which I will probably never pronounce correctly. Dang, Norwegian is hard. I tried. I even looked up pronunciation, and still, it did not help. They like mash all those syllables together. My tongue doesn't want to do it. But yeah, great classic black metal album from the early days of the second wave, straight out of Norway. Love it. Really enjoyable stuff. It's got that like icy cold production. Love the little like synth elements too. What's unique about them too is that like they were already, even though it was more sort of repetitive and simple back then, they were already toying with these longer song lengths and trying to be a little bit more progressive than everyone else. Is it a little bloated? Yes. Is it perfect? Definitely not, but it's a classic for a reason, and I feel like for that reason it deserves at least B tier, and especially when considering like they were just kids. They were basically just like teenagers when they made that album. And then even like more shocking to that is every time I'm reminded, because that came out in 1994, so did Frost. Two classic black metal albums in a single year. That's just insane. And so Frost, honestly, even better than the debut, if you ask me. Very different structured. We got more tracks, but they are on the shorter side. There's still some kind of longer stuff on here, but you've got some absolute classics. Loki, I absolutely love. Already bringing like this big atmosphere, which is what has made them, even going back to day one of my favorite bands of this era, more so than Immortal, maybe even more so than Emperor. Definitely more than Dark Throne and Mayhem and Burzum and all that. Like, they're just on another level. And the speed. Just listen to those drums and guitars. Like, just total insanity. I love how fast they are. But without losing sight of these, like, really cool melodies. I used to love playing Skyrim and listening to Frost in particular. It is an absolute blast of a combo. But yeah, so many other great stuff. You got Yggdrasil, Jotunblod, Wotan. This has to be A tier. It's not quite S tier because this band has a strong discography, y'all. So I gotta space them out a little bit. I'm really trying to make sure that no one tier has like too much stuff on it, and I'm really trying to differentiate the best that I can. So let's move along here to Eld in 1997. Now, this is one of the albums I don't love as much, as you can see from my ranking here. Now, 793 is an amazing song. Like, it's this big 16+ minute opus with this long atmospheric intro. Probably potentially in my top 10 or at least like top 20, top 15 Enslaved songs. Just truly epic. And bringing in more of this kind of like folky sound, which I really appreciate. It's fun to see the evolution of their songs evolve as you like, if you listen to these albums straight through, like I did in preparation again for doing this list for the second time, it's a real treat. When I got this album though, I didn't love it. I feel like it's not as consistent as a lot of the others. It's kind of all over the place. The songwriting isn't quite as strong, but man, are there some great moments. Like, even the songs I don't love have just absolutely like ripper guitar lines and crazy blast beats and just all sorts of great stuff. I also like Kvasia's Blood. It's got this big doomy kind of intro, and then it builds up over time and kind of spills over into the more aggressive stuff. Glempt is also good. So I think when I did my previous version of the tier list, I put this one at the bottom, And I wouldn't anymore. I'm going to graduate this one up just a little bit to B-. I don't think it's as good as these two, and I think that's kind of a fair grade for that one. But let's continue now to Blodhemn in 1998, and more of those folk elements coming out. You see on the cover art too, like a lot of sort of Viking style imagery. This is a great album. This is awesome. Like, I feel like this does everything Eld does, but even better, kind of like how Frost was an improvement on the debut. This just takes everything in a better direction, and again, making the song times more concise, and you got so many great classics on here. I Lenker till Ragnarok is awesome. I love these more kind of like chanty vocals contrasted with the crazy aggressive black metal shrieks. Vertical Gods is honestly one of my all-time favorite Enslaved songs, especially from the earlier era. This would go in my top 10, I would say. Love this riff. That one's a blast. And then this one, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this song. I'll just embarrass myself again, even more so than usual. But that's, oh, God, just, I get goosebumps. Like, I get a visceral feeling from a lot of these songs, and it's so fun. Yeah, Blodhemn, the title track, fantastic. But really, start to finish, this one's just a treat. And for that reason, it needs to be at least at A tier. Again, part of me wants to put it at S tier, but there are albums that I like even more, and I don't want to overload this thing. I will say something potentially controversial. I like it a little bit more than Frost. They're pretty close, pretty neck and neck. But let's go now to Mardraum, Beyond the Within, and I feel like this is the underdog of the discography. Nobody talks about this album. And anytime I bring it up, people are like, what album? Like, even with fans of the band. But this is where they start truly sort of evolving into really the progressive band that they would become. And you hear a lot of elements of their sound starting to come in. But what I love about it so much is it's like the perfect crossroads between that and the direction that they would go with their more progressive, overtly progressive sounding style, but then with just absolutely insane speed still represented too. So it's like the best of both worlds. But yeah, this is one of my personal favorites on the album and just in their entire discography. The bass sounds really great on this track as well. Entrance Escape is also a really good one. You got this big doomy, semi-folky kind of build up to going into the second half, which goes all over the place. Again, you're hearing more of those like progressive elements coming forwards in the songwriting. Aegis Draum. Just again, if you want to get down, get super aggressive. A lot of this album in some ways reminds me of stuff like Absu. Like, if you want stuff to be just insane and fast and a little bit violent, but also thoughtful and progressive, this is the album for you. And I will defend it to the end of time and say that this is an S tier album. People don't respect this one enough. I feel like people skip over it or something. Like, I don't know what the deal is, but if you've not listened to this album, you need to. Easily one of my top picks. But yeah, let's keep things going. We got a lot of albums to cover here, right? So Monumension. So this is the one that normally kind of gets listed as like where their real shift in sound happens. And that's true to an extent. It's definitely more so than on Mardraum. But yeah, this is where like they kind of go Pink Floyd. some really great stuff though. Like, you can hear the guitar lines already sort of shifting here. And I believe it was around this time, I think it might be after this album, that they had a change in guitar player. I actually had that in my script originally, but the original version of this recording was lost, so I had to redo it, and I lost all my notes, so it is what it is. But an excuse to enjoy more Enslaved? How could that go wrong? But yeah, the voices, another absolutely must-listen Enslaved track. Vision, Sphere of the Element too. Still getting some of those like faster, more aggressive parts on here. I also really love the album art for this one. It's one of my favorites. It's just got that like painting quality to it. And so yeah, this album has some great moments, but ultimately I feel like it's them experimenting but not quite succeeding with said experiments just yet. Because the rest of this album is very inconsistent. There's a lot of time on here where I actually do get like a little bit bored. I'm waiting for the next song. Again, lots of great moments even on those parts, but just doesn't stack up overall, I would say, to a lot of their other material. So for that reason, I'm also going to put this one at B- tier. I'd even put it a little bit lower than Eld, actually, which was a bit of a shift, but even, you know, multiple re-listens, and I own all these albums. They're all on my shelf. You've probably noticed Vikingligr Veldi in vinyl over there and other videos if you're a regular viewer. But yeah, this one just still, it just as an album does not have the same strength as some of their better stuff. So speaking of which, let's go right on to the next one with Below the Lights in 2003. And here we go. Like, just like, again, Frost was an improvement over the debut, and I think that Blodhemn was an improvement on Eld. This is kind of what they were trying to do, I think, on Monumension, but done much more effectively. Now, I will admit, when I first listened to this album, I actually didn't really like it. For some strange reason, I already did like As Fire Swept Clean the Earth. That's a top 10 Enslaved song, too, for sure. This intro is just so stunning. That transition, oh, it makes me like tear up every time. It's just something about it. It just like grips your soul. And again, the perfect melding of the progressive, the folk, the black metal, all coming together in one place for this just stunning arrangement. So that one caught me from the very beginning, and also the Dead Stare. Again, more and more of that like classic Enslaved riff really developing. Like when you think Enslaved, this is what I think of anyways, that specific guitar sound, and then of course Grutel's black metal vocals. But yeah, the rest of the album didn't do a lot for me, but every time I listen to it, this one, unlike Monumension, just gets better. And there's so many great moments on it. It's a getting prog there for sure. Havenless is another personal favorite. This one's just fun with the like folky chanting. Feels like a drinking song almost. But yeah, especially even re-listening to it just this most recent time, it moved up. It moved up. So this one is actually graduating once more from the previous tier list, because I had previously had it at B tier, I want to say. And I'm going to go ahead and move that one up to A tier. I still kind of overall like these two a little bit more than this one, which may be controversial again, but they're very different albums, so it's hard to compare them. All right, let's keep going though, shall we? Let's go to Isa. Oh, Isa. 2004. This is a monument of an album. One of those like time capsules, and just like a moment that defined the direction, I feel like, of the genre and the band moving forwards for a long time. This is stunning stuff. It's an often named favorite Enslaved album by many people for good reason, because consistently all the way through, there's no downtime here. Every track is amazing. The flow as a consistent work is great. Lunar Force after this little intro is a astounding opener, and from here on out, like basically, there's no Enslaved almost have no bad openings to their albums. The title track. Love this riff. Just gets super aggressive in black metal, but then you've got this chorus is just like captivating. Violent Dawning, another personal favorite on here. Very cool, kind of like start-stop riffs. And then the drum kicks in. I love the change of the pacing on that part. And just, need I say more? Like, I could go on and on. I could make a whole separate video about this album. Obviously, it needs to be S tier. Depending on the day, depends on whether I'm more in a Mardraum mood or in an Isa mood. But I think today I'm feeling the Isa, not only at S tier, but at the front of it. And just make note, too, that I am ranking them within each tier from right to left. The closer it is to the letter, basically, the higher up it is. Next, we have Ruun, which is kind of like almost Isa Part 2. It does feel like very much of a companion album, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's kind of that same style, but continuing to kind of like expand and mature. Love that proggy riff there. So many great stuff on here, man. It's so good. Fusion of sense and earth. Getting a little bit more of those faster elements still with those jangly tremolos. Always a good time. I'll be sad if they ever fully kind of discontinue that. The title track. This is like, I'll say, Enslaved meets Tool. So if you listen to these guitar riffs, it's very Tool-like. Which, when fused with the other elements of Enslaved, is really neat. Tides of Chaos. This one has a cool long build-up to it. Apivat also has some fun start-stop kind of rush-like songwriting. You can definitely hear that influence continuing to grow and mature on this one. And yeah, another fantastic album that I would love to put at S tier, but I gotta leave room, and I never want S tier to have more albums than any other tier, and that's the risk here. So I'm gonna put it at the tippy top of A tier. Honestly, it almost pains me for it to not be on there, but we gotta keep moving, y'all. So let's talk about Vertebrae, 2008. And this is another one where I have some kind of mixed feelings about. There are some really strong high points, like clouds, and interesting, like, effects and sounds on here that are a little bit different, like still Enslaved very much, but the like guitar and that kind of like ping-pongy effect that's going on this one I really enjoy. That's kind of unique to this song. Reflection is another standout track for sure. That driving riff always like gets me head bobbing. And then of course the Watcher. This quiet intro is just like so captivating in that transition with the drums there. Oh, it's so good. It gets me every time. I love it with the music video too, with like the freeze frames, kind of like almost like bullet time panning around them. Just stunning. Another top 10 Enslaved track. But the rest of the album, pretty inconsistent. Another one where I kind of do get bored in certain places. It's just not up to snuff. And something about the production too. I can never exactly put my finger on it, but it just doesn't have that like fullness to it. It feels a little flat, and I'm not exactly sure why, but there it is. And I know there's defenders of this album. If you love this album, great, good on you. Like, this is all subjective completely. Opinions on music there's no like correct opinion, but me personally, it's one of my least favorites. I'm going to put it at C+ tier. It's one of the ones that I am least likely to go back and re-listen to over and over again, too. All right, then we have Axioma, Ethica, Odini in 2010. Moving into a new decade. And man, if that last album disappointed me a bit, this one did not at all. This is an excellent later career album for them, with another great opener with Ethica, Odini, with this amazing guitar line and those like echoey vocals building up. So great. Radho, another awesome one with those jangly guitars. Love that. Another band I love imitating the guitar lines a lot of the time. Ruun is another awesome track. Those big, powerful head bobby parts. Singular, personal favorite on here. But again, another album that is very consistent, great start to finish listen. Like this riff here too. It reminds me of something off of like later career kind of death stuff like Human. But yeah, this is another one. Gotta make S. I think it's probably slightly better than Ruun, but it's like right there on the level. These top ones are like incrementally different in terms of quality from each other. But yeah, it's gonna go up there. And let's keep on trucking with RIITIIR, which, again, another one that I'm never fully convinced I'm saying correctly. Probably not even close. Let's just talk about Roots of the Mountain. That intro is one of the best song intros. Like, whenever people ask me, like, what are the best, like, metal song intros, you know? And then the chorus, too. Ugh. This is definitely top of the list, and probably top 5 Enslaved songs for me. One of my favorites to re-listen to over and over again. Death in the Eyes of Dawn, though, is a close second. Love this little kind of like soft, blankety kind of sound to that guitar, and just wraps you up. Feels good, man. Veil Burner has its great moments too. Thoughts Like Hammers has grown on me a lot. In fact, I thought I added it to my favorite tracks, but I guess not. More of those kind of like Rush style songwriting moments. But this is another one where for a long time I considered it to be very inconsistent. I didn't really enjoy re-listening to this album, but on this, it was this most recent listen that it shot up, and I was like, what is wrong with me? This is a great album. And I enjoyed it all the way through. And so this one moved up as well. It was previously at the kind of like B- or what was originally C tier. I'm going to bump it up to B tier. I think it's really great. It's not quite as good as these ones, but it's still a very strong outing. All right, In Times, 2015, and as you can already see, it's a little bit spoiled. I should actually do this, honestly. Every track on here amazing. Going back to the kind of fewer tracks, longer lengths, which hasn't always panned out for them. Oh, another great intro, too, with Toriza's Dreaming. Love that one. From here on out, too, like, they have some of the best singles of their entire career. But just a really expansive thing, and they're fully harnessing the song lengths, because if you're a regular to the channel, you know I complain probably the most about a lot of bands that try to do longer songs and just aren't good at it. It's not that I hate longer songs, it's that, like, only try to do it if you know what you're doing, and here they absolutely do. Also with Building with Fire, which originally I kind of didn't like as much, because it's one of the more kind of straightforward sounding tracks, with this simple kind of 4/4 beat. But it's grown on me, and it's super catchy, and then especially when it gets into these proggier sections, it's a good time. 1,000 Years of Rain is also fantastic. I believe it was another... This might have been the first single to the album, if I'm remembering correctly, but I love this acoustic part leading into the D beat. Oh, stunning. Another one of my favorite tracks. And then Daylight, awesome closer. But like I said, this is another very satisfying start to finish listen. And when I did my original tier list, it hadn't really been out that long in the scheme of things, and so I put it at A tier, but this is another one I'm graduating S tier. Gotta be S tier. This is one of the best of their later career stuff, and I might even put it a little higher than Axioma, but again, it's so hard to rank like the top ones individually because they're just all so good. All right, but then we have E in 2017, and another great opener with Storm Sun. Just love that one. Long build up, but it's worth it if you stick with it. These kind of like folky, ethereal elements, and then going into this awesome prog section. I love those triplets too with the The River's Mouth is another great one. I love that riff. So many amazing like little standout riff moments, and goes a lot of different places. Sacred Horse was another early single. Another one that really gets you kind of moving, takes you in a lot of different directions. But my problem, though, with this album is that the rest of it gets a little bit too experimental. It reminds me a little bit of Monumension in a way. I think it's better than Monumension, but it's got some of the same pitfalls where the second half in particular kind of falls apart a bit for me. And there's a lot of like kind of dreary, drifty sections that feel a little bit aimless, I guess is the best way to put it. And honestly, this was one of the ones that I actually liked it less on my most recent re-listen. Feathers of Ale has some really cool moments on it. But again, like, as far as it all coming together, I do love the organ on here too. There's a lot of like great bombastic organ moments coming through. But yeah, just not as like memorable in some of these places. And especially Jupit is just weird. It doesn't come together for me. It does kind of come back around with What Else Is There, which is one of the stronger songs. Not as strong as the first three. Good album, but definitely not one of my favorites. Let me go ahead and put it at B tier, and kind of towards the bottom of B tier at that. And then that brings us to Utgard in 2020, as of the time of this recording, their most recent full length. And this was a very interesting album. Like, they've had those periods where we've seen that kind of shift in their sound as we've been going through this, and this is another one of those for sure. Another great intro. I'm always down when they do the like classic kind of folk chanting and acoustic and everything. But then they build it up into much more than that over time. Getting those black metal elements coming in. Just a really kind of passionate track with a lot of feeling, a lot of cool different elements. Jeta Grita as well. It's one of their more kind of like traditional songs, I would say. On the album overall, it sounds a lot like some of their other material from recent times. And then Homebound, we get to kind of hear their new clean vocal directions, because they had more lineup changes, which they actually had throughout this, even with all the changes. And this singing part, like, kind of, it's a little bit of a tearjerker. So this one's cool. And then you got weirder stuff, though, like Urjutan, which is just a straight up like krautrock track. And so this was the first single, which was a ballsy move. I think it was the first single. It might have been the second one, but it was a ballsy move. I remember hearing this and being like, whoa, what what is Enslaved doing now? But I'm always interested, and that's kind of what like keeps me with them over time, is hearing them still toy with things. And I respect a band that could just, you know, a lot of these legacy acts just phone it in, but they don't. They get bored and they want to constantly try new things. I'm looking at this too, and I'm realizing this looks like Isengard in the background, but I know it's supposed to be this whole concept of Utgard, which you can look up. I talked about it in my full review. And I'll also throw in there too that the new EP, really solid. It's kind of a continuation of this sound too. It's got a mix of some of their more aggressive stuff, and the main track in particular is my personal favorite. But they also continue bringing in some of these more experimental elements from the prog world. I feel like they're kind of like going a little bit on the same trajectory as Opeth, but without dropping the metal elements, which makes me happy because I still want that. But anyways, I've been blathering on too long. As far as Utgard goes, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's not one of my favorite albums, but I really respect it. It's not as consistent maybe, and it's not one that I love re-listening to quite as much. But I did move it up a little bit. It's still B- tier, but I'm going to put it at the top of B-. But now it's your turn. Let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these Enslaved albums? And then stick around, I got more tier lists. I actually have a whole playlist of these, and also stick around for more album reviews and plenty of other content. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.